Hello, everyone. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. This is an exciting day because I have been waiting to host Gretchen Rubin for at least 15 years. And have this pairing with Dr. Laurie Santos is so very special. I'm delighted that you're here. Welcome to the watch parties that are joining us today. We have a superintendent from the Regional Office of Education at Grundy, Kendall County joining us today. Our ask of everyone is to please share this free resource. The GPS Parent Series is in its 30th year. Check online about programs that are upcoming at noon and 7 p.m. in 4 languages. There's no registration. Join us to be informed, empowered, and inspired, just as we will be today. Quickly, I want to mention what is upcoming. We will be back again on Tuesday when we will welcome again Dr. Ken Ginsberg. He has a new book out called Lighthouse Parenting about how to guide teens to develop independence and coping skills to navigate their own journey. Next Tuesday, noon and 7 p.m. And then the following week, Kristen Jones will be talking about her book, Raising Empowered Athletes, on Wednesday, January 21, how to build their confidence for peak performance. Then the following week, we are welcoming Jenny Anderson, Rebecca Winthrop on their important book, The Disengaged Teen, how to help checked out, stressed out teens and move from disengagement to drive on the 27th of January. February brings Amy Blankson, Laura Hassan. They'll be talking about some of the issues we're all concerned with today, AI, super thinkers. How do we raise tomorrow's leaders today? That's on the 4th. So check the calendar, circle your calendar, and then please share. This is going to be a great discussion. Let's get right into it. Megan Martin, the superintendent of the Regional Office of Education of Kendall, Grundy County. Welcome. She has the honor of the introductions. Take it away, Megan.
Thank you so much, Gilda, and thank you for inviting me to introduce these spectacular speakers today. Gretchen Rubin is one of today's most influential and thought-provoking observers of happiness and human nature. She's an unusual combination, a literary writer who explores how we can put transcendent ideas into practice. She's the author of 7 New York Times best-selling books, including the blockbuster #1, The Happiness Project, as well as The 4 Tendencies and Better Than Before. Her latest book, Secrets of Adulthood, Simple Truths for Our Complex Lives, has received widespread acclaim. She has been interviewed by Oprah, dined with Nobel Prize laureates, walked arm in arm with the Dalai Lama, and had her work featured in a medical journal and The New Yorker. She's even appeared as an answer on the game show Jeopardy! She is a frequent guest on television, radio, and in print, and is the founder of the Happiness Project, an ecosystem of tools designed to help people become happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative. With millions of copies of her best-selling book sold, over 280 million downloads of her podcast, her award-winning habit tracking Happier app, and an active following on her newsletters and social media, she reaches her audience wherever they may be. Rubin will be in conversation with Dr. Laurie Santos, a professor of psychology at Yale University and an authority on the science of happiness and human decision-making. Her course, Psychology and the Good Life, teaches students how to make wiser choices and live happier, more fulfilling lives. The class became Yale's most popular course in over 300 years and has been featured extensively in the media, including the New York Times, NBC Nightly News, and the Today Show, among many others. The online version of the class has attracted more than 4 million viewers and learners from around the world. Dr. Santos has won numerous awards for her science and teaching. She was recently voted one of Popular Science magazine's Brilliant 10 Young Minds and was named in Time magazine as a leading campus celebrity. We are thrilled to welcome them both to the GPS community today.
Hello,
Hello.
GPS community, and thanks, Megan, for that great introduction. We appreciate it.
Very happy to be talking to you.
Yes. And so this is a kind of fun treat because instead of you being the podcast host, I get to interview you, which is very fun. It's kind of like doing my own version of the podcast. So, but today what I wanted to do is to talk a little bit about your new book. I think so many people know you from the Happiness Project, but I was really excited to see the Secrets of Adulthood right here. Amazing. And then if we have time later, we'll kind of talk a little bit about, what we should be thinking about happiness in the new year and what you're up to in the future. And hopefully we're going to have 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions. So everyone who's listening, be thinking about the questions that are coming up and the things you want to ask Gretchen and maybe me as well. But I wanted to start with the story about the origin story for this new book, because the folks that have checked out this book might realize that it's a bit of a different animal than your typical books.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the origin story and why this book is so different.
Well, as we go through life, we all learn lessons, usually the hard way through time and experience. And I decided that I wanted to sort of distill everything that I had learned so that I could give it to my two daughters. But as I was working on it, I realized I need these lessons just as much as they do. In life, we keep learning the same lessons over and over and over. You just think, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to remind myself working is one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination, right? I think of that all the time. And so I was just starting to write these down, and I was very attracted to this because as a writer, trying to write something very succinctly, trying to distill a big idea into just a sentence or two, an aphorism is what kind of the literary term for these are, is very challenging. And I have a legal background, so I'm very familiar with how to say something complicated in three extremely verbose paragraphs. But to really try to distill an idea into just one sentence or two, which then of course has so much more power in the mind, because since it's short, we can remember it, we can reflect on it, it can provoke our own thoughts. And so writing these aphorisms became sort of a project to try to pass along what I'd learned, but also to do it in this way that was very creatively satisfying.
And you've been collecting these things for a long time. This was my understanding is you're kind of into aphorisms and have been for a while.
Well, as a writer, I noticed kind of that I was trying to be more aphoristic, that I really admire someone like Samuel Johnson or Oscar Wilde. And in my writing, I would often sort of try to have kind of a drop mic moment where I would sort of sum up a big idea in one really powerful sentence. So yeah, I've been trying to do this. And then over time, I started doing it more and more, not just as I was writing in a specific book, but even if an idea just occurred to me. One of the funny things that happened was I had hundreds of these, thousands of these. And so for Secrets of Adulthood, I just picked the best ones, but also the ones that were sort of positive or helpful or lessons. Then I had all these darker aphorisms, and I'm like, nobody wants my dark aphorisms. But then it turned out everybody's like, no, we want the dark aphorisms. So then I did a side project where I did my bleaker Secrets of Adulthood, because it turns out, and Laurie, you know this, it's like the negativity bias. Turns out people are always very interested in the negative, and I saw that Secret of Adulthood in operation myself. So yeah, I've been doing this for a long time.
We'll have to get to Secrets of Adulthood Part 2. The
dark.
Yeah.
Welcome to the dark side. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned this a little bit before, but why are aphorisms so helpful? I think specifically thinking about parents and the folks that are listening, because I find they can be incredibly helpful, both for teaching kids, but also for parents remembering the kinds of things they should do.
Well, absolutely. And sometimes even if they're not true, they're super powerful in the mind because they're just so memorable. So something like you get what you get and you don't get upset. But Laurie, I think you have a wrinkle on that. What do you think is the right way to think of that?
You get what you get and don't.
Isn't it's you get what you get and you I thought it was you that said no, don't that anyway, that's kind of the wrong message, and they had some kind of.
You'll be upset, but then you can work on regulating.
It's really yeah, there you go. Or something like you're only as happy as your least happy child. Is that even true? Do you agree with that? But it's short and it's memorable, and so it's a good, it gets you to understand your own thinking, because even if you don't agree with it, it provokes you to think about your own thoughts more. And so I think that they can be very helpful, because since they say something very succinctly, you can kind of think about your own values, your own beliefs, your own assumptions. And then if it's something that you really believe, it's easier to carry it forward with you. I love that book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And one of their things is like, um, uh, you give them their wish and fantasy. That's not such an aphorism, but it's like a succinct thing. And it's like, I do that all the time, even with adults, give them their wish. Oh gosh, I wish I could wave a magic wand and just like make it right. So like making it short makes it more powerful in the mind. And if it can rhyme, it's even better. I'm not good at rhyming, but I'm good at like paradox. Until a lot of my aphorisms are expressed in sort of a paradox or a tension. That's a very traditional thing to do with an aphorism.
Which I think is one of the most powerful things, and I think matters a lot in this field of the space of happiness, right? Like one of the reasons the paradoxes are so powerful, it's like, here's what you think, but actually it's really the opposite. And, this is a message that I've had in my podcast and on our work, which is like, our minds lie to us about happiness. A lot of things you think, but actually it works like this. And so there is this sort of tension in this interesting way.
Or both things are true. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, because people will say, like, you have to live in the now. And it's like, or like plan for the future. It's like we have to live in the now and plan for the future. Both are important. Yeah. But we kind of want to fall into a binary where we want to pick one or the other. So, yeah, how do you capture that succinctly, that tension?
So I think you've done this in a lovely way in your book. And if you're listening now and you don't have Secrets of Adulthood, you should check it out. But I wanted to use part of this conversation to talk about some of my favorite aphorisms, and especially the ones that might be most relevant for parents, given that we're
Sure.
talking about the GPS community. And so one of my favorite ones, perhaps given what I study, is this one. Happiness doesn't always make us feel happy. I think very important for parents to think about when thinking about kids, but happiness doesn't always make us feel happy. Talk to me about how you think about this quote.
Well, that's one that the scientists among us sometimes take exception to because, like, that's not something you could say scientifically, but you can say it in a literary way. And I think people understand what it means that, like, sometimes to do things that make us happier, we have to deprive ourselves of something, or we have to push ourselves to do something that feels uncomfortable, or we have to extend ourselves in a way that feels difficult. We have to sacrifice the present in order to gain something in the future. We have to do something that makes us feel bad because it upholds an important value for us. And so I think sometimes, and I don't know if you experience this, Laurie, but sometimes people, when they know that I'm talking about happiness, they think that what I mean is that everybody is like skipping through life in a 10 on the 1 to 10
Like a
scale.
big smiley
Like,
emoji all the time. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, that's not realistic, and it's not even a good life. There's times where you don't expect yourself to feel happy when it wouldn't even be appropriate to feel happy. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a place in a happy life, or that you wouldn't deliberately do things that don't make you feel happy, like, all kinds of things, because in the end, you know that they're going to contribute to your happiness. And so it's this idea that, like, using your immediate feelings about it is not a good compass.
And I think that this is so important in the context of parenting, right? But sometimes parenting for the future happiness of your kid, or even the current happiness of your kid, is actually making your child very uncomfortable in the moment, or really unhappy with what they can't get, in the grocery store, or the homework that you're going to make them do, or the small thing that you're going to push them towards, because ultimately the future is happiness is what you're going for too. So it doesn't look like happiness in the moment, but matters a lot for the future.
And this is just as true for parents, because, like, maybe you're a pretty introverted person and, like, you don't feel like going to that parent coffee and, like, making polite conversation with a bunch of parents you don't know, but you think to yourself, look, these people could be in my life for a very long time. Like, let me really extend myself. Let me really go outside my comfort zone and deal in a social situation that is really not to my liking. But these are important relationships. And let me do that, because this could really, like, in the long run, could really, really contribute to my happiness and to the happiness of my child too. It doesn't feel good right now, but I'm doing it because I'm making an investment in my long-term happiness.
Love it. And this idea of an investment gets to my next aphorism that I'm very excited about. It's about how you change your habits and whether you should be changing your habits. It is, quote, we can't change our children's nature by nagging them or signing them up for classes. I feel like I want to put this on a billboard outside my Ivy League institution, my Yale students, for parents to see. But yes, talk to me about this one and the insight we get from it.
I mean, it just, and this reminds me of one of my favorite traditional proverbs, because, like, an aphorism is something that you attribute to an actual person, like I wrote it. A proverb is like something that is just part of our culture, folk wisdom, which is you can't push a rope.
Yeah.
And I think this comes up with the children all the time. You can't push a rope. If there is a child that is just absolutely not going to do it, like the most classes, if they have no aptitude for it, if they have no interest in it, you can't push a rope. you can't change their fundamental natures just by being on the outside. And what is this? I'm forgetting. What is the metaphor? It's like the ceramicist and the gardener, or what is, I think it's Alison Gopnik has these
Yes, yeah.
two. Yeah. Um, but anyway, one is like you think of yourself as the artist that's shaping this like raw clay of your child, and the
Mhm.
other one is like let me help them flourish to be whatever. I've got a sunflower, I've got an asparagus, like whatever it is. But yeah, I think that sometimes I think I myself I find it very comforting to think I'm not that powerful.
Love that.
I don't
Mhm,
have to
mhm.
take that much responsibility for a lot of things because I don't have that power. I can't take credit for it, but I also don't feel responsible for it because a lot of it is the child, and you're there to support the child and help the child, but like you're not going to fundamentally change their nature.
It's also like how I love this idea that you don't necessarily have agency to change their nature. But the other reason I love this particular version of the quote with the nagging them or signing them up for clashes is
Yeah.
it's a reminder of what power you do have to change their nature and the best way to go about that. And I think one of the
Yes.
problems with human nature is we think we change other people's behavior by telling them what to do. But
Yes.
like what we know from all the work on resistance, of course, is that like one of the worst ways to change behavior is to tell someone what to do, especially a child and especially a teenage or tween child, where you tell them what to do and they immediately want to do exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
And so this, I know the GPS has had David Yeager out, who does all this work on what he calls collaborative troubleshooting, which is this idea of like assume that your kid has figured out ways to think through these things and talk with them about how you can troubleshoot it rather than telling them what to do. And it turns out there's all this research showing like how much more effective that is of like, well, let me ask you, like, what was your thought pattern of
Yeah.
thinking about this, right? That's not nagging them. That's kind of considering them an agent in their own life and their own change. And turns out that works so much better than the nagging or the forcing.
And that reminds me of another secret of adulthood, which is and it's one of the saddest truths about happiness, which is like we can't make people change. Like we
Yes.
wish we would want to make them change. We can't make people change. But when we change, a relationship changes. And so
Mhm.
sometimes by changing yourself, you can change the atmosphere of your household. And like when I was originally writing the Happiness Project, one of the things I realized is like I'm like one of these very high strung people. I get very snappish and I get very worked up. I'm very rigid. And I realized like I'm just creating this atmosphere. And if I could control myself by managing myself, regulating myself, getting enough sleep, getting up a little early so I had time to get myself organized before my little kids got up and all that, I could I could be more lighthearted, more tolerant, more, like more fun. And that then the whole atmosphere of my household would change. And so
Yes.
again, you can't change others, but you can sometimes in some ways change yourself. And then others respond to that because we're social creatures.
Yeah, this is like highlights the lovely work of the late Wharton Business School professor Sigal Barsade, who did all this work in organizations, but I think is really relevant for families on what she calls affective spirals, right? So you go into work and you go to the first meeting and there's someone who's sitting there who's really grumpy and just kind of in a bad mood. And you kind of catch that in the first meeting. And then you go into your second meeting with totally different people and now you're grumpy. And then they catch it and they take, so it's this affect spiral where like somebody brings you down and then you spiral everyone else down.
No,
And I think
emotional contagion. I love that.
emotional
I
contagion.
love that phrase. Like we are infecting each other with our
Yeah,
moods,
it's
just
like
like,
we think it's like the kids bring the germs home from daycare, but what they really bring is the emotions home from daycare, and we catch
yeah,
them right. But the beauty of Seagal's work is that when people first hear about this work, I think they sometimes feel like, "See, I'm catching everyone else's emotions." But you can also read that work as incredibly agentive. You can say like, "I have control over this," right? If I walk into the room and I'm being kind of frantic and upset and kind of pushing people to clean the house and whatever, then like that mood is going to transmit to other people. So I read the emotional contagion work as having like is really good for me as like a leader or like in a family situation. It's like, oh, if I don't like the vibe, I can change my own vibe, and a little bit of that vibe will like transmit to everyone else, whether they realize it or not.
well, and the fact that it's going back and forth. So in many ways, we're like creating the atmosphere in which we live. And so, of course,
Yeah.
crabby people live in a crabby atmosphere, and like it's just getting crabbier all the time. And so, yeah, it's a really very valuable thing to think about. Like what is the energy that you're putting out? Yeah.
And so that leads to another aphorism that's about parenting energy and the energy you want to bring to a situation. It is, quote, at some point, a parent must shift from coach to cheerleader. Talk to me about this one. I'm curious if this was one that resonated in your own parenting and in your
No,
own.
no, absolutely. Well, and this very much relates to what you were just saying about, the troubleshooting, right? Because the troubleshooting is not something that a coach does. It's something, it's a collaborative thing. It's not from the top down. It's like, okay, let's get through this. And the cheerleader is like, you're there to encourage and to support, not to feel like you're directing. And probably by the time you're asking yourself that question, you should have switched many, many
A
months
while ago.
before. Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's one of those things that that probably the just by asking the question, you've answered it because it's presenting itself. Yeah.
Yeah, this reminds me of I've been recently reading Annie Duke's book about quitting and when you should decide to quit. And she makes this note that it will never feel like the optimal time to quit because as soon as you're always quitting when there's some moment of uncertainty when you're like, well, maybe I could push through this and so on. So
Yes.
like it will never feel like that. And I feel like for this aphorism, it's the same. It's like it's never going to feel like the moment to stop giving all the advice and switch over to just being supportive. But like it's actually always the optimal time. It's
Right,
probably
right,
if you're
right, right.
thinking about it, it's probably already
Yes.
the optimal time to
Yes,
do.
yes. And I think of a secret of adulthood that's like, if you're asking the question, you probably already know the answer, which is like, you know, should I bring an umbrella? It's like, yeah, probably, because if it's occurring to you. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. But, a lot of these so far have been kind of, things parents might be doing wrong, or you're not being as much of a cheerleader as you should be, or, don't be signing them up for classes. And what I love about Secrets of Adulthood is there's lots of aphorisms about being nice to ourselves and accepting ourselves. And one of my favorite ones is this one, accept yourself, but and also expect more from yourself. This is
Well,
like perfect paradox, but also perfect balance.
well, see, and I'm so glad you mentioned that one because of all of them, I think that is my very favorite. And it
Oh,
took
I
me
hadn't asked that
so
question before.
it took me so long to understand this because you know how it is. Like you read about it and it's like on the one hand, it's like self-compassion and you're enough as you are and like don't be hard on yourself and accept yourself. And then on the other hand, it's like push out of your comfort zone and stretch and go the extra mile and like get at. And I was like, well, which is true, right? Again, because I was falling into that the binary. Like, should I accept myself or should I expect more from myself? And then it's like, no, you accept yourself and expect more from yourself. And here's the thing where it relates to parents and children is only an individual knows what is the line between acceptance and being able to expect more from yourself because for everybody that's different. Like maybe you would say going on a solo hike, camping trip for a weekend. Like, is that something where it's like, okay, that is something that you can expect of yourself, or you're like, no, that's not my thing. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes you're just like, no, that's not my thing. And that's okay because you want to accept yourself. But then all of us have that thing where like, oh yeah, I really could expect myself to get a driver's license. Like, yeah, I don't want to. It's going to be a huge pain, but okay, yeah, fine. I should do that. I should push myself to get my driver's license. But both are true. I think that and you have to be willing to say okay for other people too that like sometimes it is just something isn't the right goal for somebody. It's funny. I was talking to my mother. So when I was I'm like one of these people who do everything that they're supposed to do. And in my personality framework, I'm an upholder. If anybody knows my personality framework. And I was talking to my mother because I played field hockey and I'm a terrible, terrible athlete, horrible athlete in every possible way. No eye-hand coordination. I never played. I never wanted to play. I hated it. It's probably the thing in my life that took the most like just to do it. I remember the day in 10th grade when they told us that they'd accidentally left the sprinklers on the field hockey. So we couldn't practice. And it was like literally one, other than my husband being cured from hepatitis C on January 9th, 2015. That was probably the happiest moment of my life, which is very sad. And I said to my mother, I don't think I should have done that. And my mother's like, oh, but you had the joy of being on a team and you pushed yourself and it was great exercise and it's good to be outdoor. And I'm like, yeah, but there was an opportunity cost there. What would I have done with that time and that energy? That took a lot out of me to
Mhm.
do that. So
And I
maybe
think this is something so important for parents to remember. I think that accept yourself and expect more from
so
yourself. I think and so be accept your kid, but expect more from your kid
right.
is the balance.
So what should, and I still don't know because there were pros and cons and I could see it either way, but, and we always learn blah, 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 but it's like, right, accept or accept.
Hmm.
you can't always just say like you give it a try, stick with it, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
that
part of that's, I think, knowing your kid, but also knowing yourself. Before you and I became podcast colleagues and chatting about all this stuff, I was like a super fan of some of your books.
oh
And one of my favorite early Gretchen expressions is this idea of be Gretchen, right?
yes.
Like, don't try, like, sometimes we get in our head these like theories about the things we should be doing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
often we make material purchases that go with these theories of ourselves that
Yes. The
we should be
fantasy
doing.
self. Yes.
Exactly. And it's like, and if you just knew yourself a little bit better, you're like, I'm just not gonna do that. Around the time I first read the Gretchen idea, I was in this period where I was like, I'm gonna get more fit. And I decided I was gonna do rollerblading. This is like, I have terrible knees. I'm just like not very fit. I'm really uncoordinated. I've broken my knees several times, like falling on ice. This is like a really bad idea. But I bought these like roller skates. I like got I was like really into this and pushed and pushed and pushed for a while. And then like had this moment where it's like, if I'm gonna be Laurie, like she's just doesn't, she's never gonna do that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we need to, I think with self-compassion, we need to apply this to
Yes.
ourselves, but
Yes.
I do think we need to apply this to our kids too, because
Wait, and
I see this in my Yale student parents where it's like, well, my kid is a STEM kid, my kid's gonna be pre-med, and I'm like, when I see your kid, he's in the art studio all the time, and he's
yeah.
like, reading Shakespeare, and that's when he lights up, and so maybe we need to do. So this kind of line between pushing and accepting, I think, is a really important one to play with.
Well, and another place that this kind of comes up in another paradox, and this took me a long time to understand as well, is that love is unconditional and love is demanding. Love
Mm.
accepts you just as you are, and love expects the best from you. And I
Yeah.
think this is a really confusing thing for parents because, the way that I thought of it is like, I feel like my daughters are just perfect. I love them exactly the way they are. And yet I spend a lot of time like trying to subtly badger
Nudging
them.
them in a certain
Yeah,
direction. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Trying to use my Jedi mind tricks to like get them to do but both are true, right? Because love says, you can rewrite that paper and
Mhm.
do better. I know what you're capable of. You want me to say it's great right now, but I'm just saying like,
Mhm.
you can do better, and both are true, and that can be very confusing.
Yeah. I think the core way to deal with the paradox is to like think about the self, right? It's very like Socrates and philosophical about know thyself. Like,
Hmm.
what are your true values? You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like in the like roller skating, like my true value at that time was like, I wanted to get fit more, but it wasn't like I have to be on roller skates and I have to mess with my knees and squat all the time. It was like, oh, the value I was trying to get for was be a little bit more fit and like maybe have some adventure, like push myself on something, but it didn't have to be that thing. And I
Right.
think that's an insight for parents to think about. It's like what's the core there? Like what's the true value as opposed to the like superficial stuff. And that can get you closer to figuring out when's a good time to nudge a little bit and push because we're not meeting that value yet versus like no, you can meet that value a different way if you get creative.
Well, no, and then like being on a team is something that you might say, oh, I think that would be a really valuable experience for my child. But there's all kinds of
Yeah.
teams, like being a theater kid, that is a kind of team. There
Yeah.
are sports teams. There's volunteers. I meet with this core group of kids and we do this volunteer work every Saturday. That's a team. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I think, yeah, we get locked into like one definition of what something looks like instead of thinking like, well, what is the larger value? The larger value is I want you to like know what it's like to be part of a group and hang out with people that you wouldn't otherwise know and work on something together and try to like, improve yourselves or like build towards something. And it's like those are very valuable, but that can look a lot of different ways once you take that step back. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're switching to a different one, which is again another one about behavior change, but it's one about I think parents becoming more honest about the behavior change that they're demanding of others. So this is, quote, if we're trying to encourage a particular behavior, we should be willing to submit to that behavior. In
Oh,
other words, if you're a parent trying to get your kid to put their phone away at the dining room table, you might need to put your own phone away at the dining room table. If you're, nudging your husband about like cleaning the dishwasher, like emptying the dishwasher, you need to empty the dishwasher yourself if you're going to do it. And this one I resonated with because if I'm being honest, both like in my work life and in my family life, the things that get on my nerves the most are the ones that I'm not doing myself. So I can be the kind of person who's really in the mode of encouraging another person's behavior because I'm like annoyed about that behavior myself or um,
no,
yeah.
I think it's always the question of, are you getting enough sleep? Are you binge watching TV? Are you getting exercise? Are you putting away your phone? Are you reading difficult books? Are you, all these things. It's always start with, and we often like, those are things that we value. So we want, I think
Yeah.
you can always, so my next book is about the empty nest. And one of my favorite pieces of advice that's going to be in this book is like, whatever you do for your freshmen, do for yourself, because that's what
Mm.
you value. If you've been spending all this time, money, and energy on their freshman dorm room, what are you doing about where you live? If you're like very worried about if they're going to get enough sleep and get enough exercise and eat regular meals, like what is your sleep, exercise, and what does that look like for you? If you're saying to them, put down your phone, put yourself out there, talk to somebody new, like join a club, it's like, what are you doing to build your relationships? Because often our advice is very tied to what we value.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not advising my daughters to like, like dress more fashionably, because Liz, like, I just walk around in yoga pants and a hoodie all day long. Um, because, and so I think sometimes our advice is a clue for like what we want to work on, but it's certainly like, before we start badgering other people to do it, we should do it ourselves. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the phone is probably the most
Oh my gosh, the phone is so
prevalent.
hypocritical. Yeah, I see so many parents, worried about their kids' phone use, and then I'll be in the middle of a conversation with them. Oh, excuse me, and it's not even eyes will drift away and not pay attention, right? Yeah.
Wait,
Um,
what's the word for it's got a very funny term. It's like the idea that like when you're doing something, you're like, oh, but I have understandable reasons for doing this, and so it makes perfect sense. But if
yes.
other people do it, like it's because they're obnoxious. It's like you think they're doing it because of their characteristics, and you're doing it because of circumstance. It's called
Yeah, this is a like classic social psychology effect where it's like, well,
yeah,
I was only answering my phone because that was a particular, I was really
yeah, yeah,
looking forward to an email. Mine
yeah,
was
yes,
situational,
right,
whereas
right,
the other one was a trait attribution. Like you're
right.
just bad.
Yes, yeah, fundamental attribution error. That's
Fundamental
it.
attribution
Yeah,
error.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
terrible
Um,
phrase. Yeah.
yeah, but the other reason so you can look at this aphorism and think it's about the bad stuff. It's about like if you're nudging someone towards a particular behavior, it's because like, well, it's the thing that gets on you that you're having some trouble with yourself or that you need to look at yourself. But I love the framework that you brought to it when you're thinking about the empty nesting, which is like it's also a clue to your hidden needs, that your values that you're not paying attention to. And I feel honestly in midlife, but especially as parents, we don't get a lot of clues about like the things that we really need and the things that we really value. I think the things that we get newly on other people in our lives about is one of them. Another one that I'm thinking about a lot, and I know comes up in the book, is this idea of nostalgia, of like, oh, I'm thinking back to high school was so fun because I would go to these parties or something would happen. Or like, oh, that one time where we took that trip to Italy, like that was so fun because da 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 da. Often the da 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 has some elements of something that you're missing right now, right? I think people who look back to like, so fondly think back to high school or college are like, well, that was a social time and you're feeling a little lonely and you might need to invest in your social relationships. Or, oh, that trip, like you had some adventure or some serendipity. Like maybe you need that serendipity on a Thursday night. And so I've been looking at all these other cases where it's like this feeling that we get of like frustration with a family member because we want them to pick up this habit or a moment of nostalgia. It's actually giving us these real clues about like what's a need that we have that we are not fulfilling right now and we're
I
not paying attention to.
I have a perfect example of that. So, because I'm talking about to everybody at the Empty Nest, this guy was saying to me, I was so angry at my freshman son because like he was like I was looking through the course catalog and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you could take this, you could take this is amazing, this is amazing. And he was just sort of griping about his requirements, and I was like, I can't believe like you have all of this in front of you and you're not even appreciating and taking advantage of it. I would die to be in your shoes. And his son was like, well, why don't you go back to school? And he was like, why don't I go back to school? And now he's in history grad school, like on the side of his job, because he's like his anger, his frustration was really because of his what he wanted, which was, oh my gosh, I would love to learn. I would love to like open up my mind and study all these fascinating subjects and like feel like there was this cornucopia of opportunities. So it really was a good, and his son immediately recognized it. He was like, okay,
He's like, that's what you want to do.
you
Like you want to take the pottery
you
class.
spot it, you got it. Yeah, no. So I think you're exactly right that a lot of times that we what we bring to others is really what we want. A funny example of this too, of like not knowing yourself, is like we often change what's easy to change instead of what we should change, and so we're often
Yes.
like misdirecting. So a friend of mine said, uh, I live in New York City, and she was going to look for an apartment because she wanted outdoor space. And so like 6 months later, I'm like, oh, how's your apartment hunting going? And she said, oh, I gave it up. And I said, why'd you give it up? And she said, oh, I thought I wanted outdoor space, but I realized I actually want a husband. I was like, that's an important realization to make, right? Because sometimes we're like, oh, we were going to change something. Um, because it's
And this
easy
is
to
so often true,
change.
getting back to like my, buying my roller skates. Often we do that
Yes.
with material purchase. Like I'll buy this thing and then I'll get it.
Yes.
But it's like actually what you want is like something different and deeper. And yeah.
Or somebody like I was talking to, like, bought an expensive tennis racket, but he never used it because what he really needed was time to play, and he didn't make
Ah,
time to play. Just buying a racket isn't enough. Like, he had
hmm.
to like make space for it. And I think this comes up with parenting a lot too. Like, sometimes we'll like sort of gesture to something that we want, but we haven't taken the step back to be like, okay, well, like, what do we really mean by this? I think this is one reason why people love to travel as a family, because like now it's a way to like push out the outside world, say we're going to have an adventure together, we're going to spend a lot of intense time together, maybe we're going to put down our phones because we're going to be like sightseeing or whatever. It feels like this is a way to like create that framework, but like you could just go somewhere in your own town, like you don't have
Yes.
you don't have to travel, you could do that. But it's like that kind of forces us to push everything out so that we really have what we want. um
Hmm.
but we can do that in many ways. Yeah.
And this is, I think this is something that comes up. You and I are both in this space of kind of wellness and self-care. And I feel like this is a spot where people get it wrong all the time. It's like, if you Google self-care or you watch TikTok videos, it's all like, oh, it's like a new bubble bath or like a bath bomb or whatever. And it's like, no, no, no. Actual self-care is like asking for help or canceling some things. You get things off your plate. It's like we
Yeah.
often go to the like easy, I'm going to purchase the tennis racket, but we don't
Yes.
deal with the hard problem of like actually need time and space to deal with this.
Yes, exactly,
Which
exactly.
nicely gets to our next aphorism that I think lots of parents listening will relate to. It is sometimes to keep going, we need to allow ourselves to stop. The importance of rest and time and breaks.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me about why getting going sometimes requires a little bit more free time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so easy to get into this mode of like just pushing, pushing, pushing. And I don't know, I often have this thing like, well, if I just cleared off everything on my desk, the way that I'll really feel relaxed is if I answer all my emails.
Yes, inbox
And,
zero. Once I
yeah,
get to
yeah,
inbox zero, the like
yeah,
Zen of
yeah,
the
yeah. If I
universe will
just get
descend
these
on
5 things, if I just get these
me.
5 things done, then I can really relax. But it's like by the time I've done those 5, there's 2 more, and I'm like, okay, let me just do these. And so sometimes you really have to allow yourself to stop. And for some people, like the only way that they can do that is if they sort of tie it to the idea of going forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that there's a sense that the science really backs that up. There's some lovely work by Ashley Willens at Harvard Business School on this concept that she calls time affluence, this idea that you feel wealthy in time. And it turns out that time affluence, just kind of feeling wealthy in time, has like a ton of benefits. She's this one survey where she finds that if you self-report having lots of free time or not being the opposite, like kind of being time famished, right, where you're so starved for time, if you self-report being time famished, that's as big a hit on your well-being as if you self-report being unemployed, right? We know, like, losing your job suddenly, most of you are listening have a job. If you lost it suddenly, that would be a hit on your well-being. Just not having any time for rest is that. But there's also so much data that it like matters for your productivity, right? That if you just have this space, it can all of a sudden feel like you think more innovatively, you're kind of making better decisions. Obviously, you can like emotionally regulate better so you're not like snippy and nasty with like the people in your life all the time. But we really forget that like what that means is like to be more productive, you have to take stuff off your plate, right? Like to feel more energized, you have to stop expending your energy and resting and so on.
And even the research that shows like if you take a 10-minute break every hour, your productivity and your concentration go up. All the research about napping, like I deliberately started napping because there's just so much overwhelming research about napping. I'm like, I have to try it. I love my nap. It's like 25 minutes. It's so great. So like really thinking about like, well, what does this look like for me? Maybe it's an afternoon every weekend. Maybe it's a night that you take for yourself. Maybe you really take a proper lunch hour, which like a lot of people in the United States don't take really proper lunch hours. Maybe if you're a morning person, you get up a little early so you have time to yourself before everybody else gets up. I have a friend who loves to read and he gets up an hour early and just reads for pleasure for an hour because he's like, otherwise I just don't have time. And I'm like, or like I know somebody gets up and watches TV, which somehow seems
Yeah.
very decadent, but it's like if you're a morning
It's your
person,
time. Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
your time. And if that's what you need to sort of like, go through the day, and if you feel like, oh look, I already got my episode of Pluribus in, like I kind of feel like I've had like a little bit of fun, that could energize you throughout the day because you feel like, oh, I gave myself a little bit of a treat.
Mhm.
So yeah, so whatever that would look like for you, but absolutely, the research here is really clear. Like, and I think I have another aphorism, which is like working the hardest isn't, I forget how I said it because I had to work on it.
The
So
best work, or
yeah,
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 like
yeah.
the
It's like
most
it's like
effective.
the yeah, the most effective way isn't just to work the hardest.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we know this. It's so funny psychologically that we struggle with this because I think we know this physically, right? Like if you talk to any physical trainer, they'll talk about things like active rest, or even like people who are training for ultra marathons train at 80%, right?
Yes.
Like we know that bodies work this way. We forget that minds work this way. And I think this is one that's super important for parents. I think both to give yourself permission as a parent to do less and allow yourself to stop. I think a bigger one for parents, especially intense parents of the kind that might come to a place like GPS to get advice, you also have to let your kids do this too.
Oh,
One of
can
my
I give
please, please go
let
ahead.
me
Yeah.
just jump in with a really quick example because this is so true. So yeah, I'm like get it done. Like let's check it off the list. And I going when we were doing my daughter's freshman drop off at college, like I was like, okay, I was like, Gretchen, you know this brings out the worst in you. Stay calm. Like nothing matters. People matter more. We're not in a I had to like do all this self talk before, but of course I got swept up and like let's just do this and this and this and this. And then my daughter looked at me and she's like, let's just go get some coffee. And
Hmm.
this was against all of my instincts, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
we're just going to walk away with this half finished.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm like, of course,
Yeah. Hmm.
let's go get some coffee.
Your daughter's very wise. It seems
She
like she is.
is,
Yeah.
right?
Very wise. Yeah.
She should
But
write the secrets of adulthood for me. No,
but I think this is also something parents need to do when it comes to the stuff that's on kids' plates, right? Like I'm thinking of the high school students with a million different activities and so on.
yeah.
And one of my favorite recent papers actually it was a set of economists that analyzed the number of extracurricular activities and hours that kids were putting in with the outcome, right? Like what do their grades look like or getting into college and so on. And they found that like yes, you know, more is better only up to a point. It's like very similar to the data on like income and happiness. Like more is better, but then it levels off and then it goes down. And they found that most students at elite schools could take away 1 to 2 hours of whatever they're doing, whether it's homework or extracurriculars or whatever, and they would not just be the same in terms of whatever metric you're looking at, like their SATs or what colleges they get into, they would actually be better. And I feel like this is like a thing that I keep reminding my, friends who have high school kids, but also my like Yale students. It's like you can actually take 1 to 2 hours off your plate, and that might make you more effective at everything else you're doing, or like, at least it'll make you more sane and less burned out than many of our students feel these days.
Well, and I also feel like there's, we kind of don't think about the opportunity cost of children's time. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you should just do more and more and more and not think like, well, if you're doing this extracurricular, maybe you're not going to push yourself in this other way to do something more creative or more demanding because you're just managing your time. And maybe you're
Yeah.
doing that
Or
in a
sleep,
very,
right? Which we know
or
is so
sleep. Oh
important.
my gosh, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting that they actually like
Yeah, it
crunch
was
the
like a very,
numbers.
I can share the link to the paper with the GPS folks, but it was like this very nerdy economist paper where they did, like looked at all like these, big data sets and stuff. And yeah, and I think when we hear those data, we're like, oh yeah, of course. Like if I look at like the most overloaded, say kids at Yale with all their extracurriculars, I'm like every single one of them, if they took off their least favorite one for an hour, they'd be better off, right? Like they'd have more space, they'd sleep more, they'd talk to friends more, they'd exercise more, they'd do all this stuff that was super relevant for their mental health and their social connection and their rest. But we feel like, they got to keep going. They got to hustle. Like, time is money, all these things, which in the paradox is, of course, is true. But if you don't give yourself a little bit more space, sometimes that balance gets overloaded.
Every year I make a list of things I want to get done. So I did 26 things for 2026. And one of the things is because eight is 2 plus 6, 26, 2 plus 6.
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay.
decided I would delegate or drop 8
Ooh, I
responsibilities that
love
I
it.
have now. Like
There's
I
some
stopped doing holiday cards. People, you heard it here first. This
no
was
holiday credit.
so hard for me to give up. But like there is a time for holiday cards and then that time ends. And I'm like, I think this is the time. And it was very painful, but I'm like, it's time.
I love that you said that because we think that the taking things off the plate is going to be joyous, right? Because I talked to so many of these conversations with Yale students about like, you're overloaded, you got too much on your plate. What are you going to take off your plate? And they think that like when they decide like I'm going to get rid of that extracurricular that I don't
That's
want to
such
deal
a
with, that
good
it'll be
point.
joyous. But the instant reaction is grief, right? It's grief because like
100%.
you probably you're doing the Christmas cards might be a chore and it might be time, but like there's something there that's sad to give them up. If only because, as the writer Oliver Berkman often talks about, when we take stuff off our plate, we have to admit our finiteness. Like you have to admit that, like, I'm not infinite. I don't have the space for Christmas
Right.
cards. Like
And
I have
that,
to admit this thing I loved isn't my priority anymore.
well, and also a season of life has ended.
Yes, yes.
Like we're not in that stage of like little kids in their matching pajamas
Mhm.
anymore. And that it is, that's such a good point. I hadn't thought about, and that's so reassuring because I think if you expect that something's going to make you feel really good and it doesn't,
You're like,
then
oh,
you,
maybe that was a mistake. I should, yeah, put that back on
but
the plate.
but if
Yeah.
somebody says to you, this is going to be really painful, and then you always have these fantasies. But maybe if I had done it for one more year, then all these things. This
Mhm.
happens often in work, right? Or like with children's extracurriculars. Well, maybe if you do it for another year, then you'll really like learn to love it, and you'll like
Yes.
really develop an aptitude for it. It's like, okay, I've been doing it for 3 years. Like at some point, you have to let go of the fantasy, but maybe it isn't a fantasy. Maybe you just haven't done it long enough, and then you get it. So I think that's really helpful to say, this isn't good. This may not make you feel happy, but in the
Yes.
long run, it's going to free up space for more things. It's like
Because
putting
happiness
put.
doesn't always make us feel happy.
Whoa, nice
Oh,
callback.
yes, good, good. And since we're at the end of my aphorisms, and since you mentioned these sort of seasons of life, I wanted to give you a couple minutes to talk about what you're working on now, because even
Yep,
though we're talking to lots of parents, parents have empty nesting on the horizon.
yep,
Parents also going through, the kids in the pajamas aren't happening anymore, and so
yep.
on. Yeah, so tell us about the new project.
Well, thank you for asking. So I haven't even sold this book yet, but I'm very excited about it. It's about the empty nest, which I'm rebranding Open Door because none of us like the phrase empty nest, but just because that's the common phrase, that's what I'll use. But it's a forced reckoning of adulthood. For many of us, issues that have been ignored or pushed aside, or like we just haven't had the bandwidth to manage, come rushing to the fore. And so you're dealing with so many changes all at once to your household, to your identity, to your schedule. All kinds of unexpected things come up. You have issues with your relationships with your sweetheart, your spouse if you have one, your siblings, your family, like all these things. It's all happening at one time. And so, as somebody who studies happiness, for me, just because this is this forced reckoning where people are asking themselves, sometimes for the first time, or maybe in a long time, who am I? What am I for? How do I move forward? What do I do with myself all day? Like all of these things become very pressing. And there's just very little, I think, useful guidance and like even how to think about it.
Yeah.
How do you understand yourself and what you want and what you need? And one of the things that, one of my secrets of adulthood is the place that hurts isn't always the place that's injured, and
Mm.
which is true literally and also figuratively. And so I think sometimes like with the empty nest, people are like, oh, like somebody said to me, she's like, well, I feel like I have a lack of purpose, and I have no friends, and so I'm just like now that my kids are out, I just like I don't know what to do with myself. Like I always put my family first, and now that just doesn't make sense, and so I think I need to get a divorce.
No.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
You're like, that's maybe not where I would start giving your
Yeah.
description of how you feel. Like you kind of like think, oh, this is what's hurting, but it's like,
Yeah.
well, maybe you need to look around and like really understand what the issue is. And I think parents start thinking about I've had so many people, since I've said I was working on this book, people with kids in kindergarten that are like, oh my gosh, I'm already realizing like the day is going to come and I'm like counting down the hours. But like there's a lot we can do to prepare ourselves to really like ease that transition if we like, you know how it is, Lori,
Yeah.
mindful, always got to be mindful when it comes to happiness. Like to set yourself up with like, do you have friends? Like, do you
Mhm.
have an identity apart from like your family being the defining principle of your life? All these things
And
that
so,
are,
since I know so many of the Gretchen books are you doing a little happiness experiments on yourself, any one insight that you've done now that your daughter is off to college that you're going to be sharing with the readers in the new
well,
book?
Well, this is a distinction that I think is really helpful. So book people and tree people, because I realize my husband and I match, and this is a really good thing for us. But sometimes people don't match. So a book person is somebody who like thinks of their life as like a book of short stories, and they love to turn the page, start a new chapter. They might often like to reinvent themselves, or like have a big shift. And then there are tree people, and tree people want to be rooted in place. They want to grow and flourish, but they want to be rooted in place. And often what happens in my observation in the empty nest is like there might have been a person who was a book person all along, but they were sort of stuck in one place because of their children. And so now the book person is like, oh my gosh, let's move to Florida, let's move to Portugal. Like and the tree person is like, what are you talking about? How can we leave our friends and our family and our community? And so they're both baffled, and they often say like, you don't care about the kids, you don't understand. Instead of just saying like, oh, a book person is feeling suddenly free, but a tree person doesn't have that same impulse. So my husband and I, we're both tree people. We live around the corner from where my husband grew up. I mean, you don't cross a street. My husband is so tree, and I'm so tree. So this is good because we share that. But it showed me like, oh, this is good. This is something that we don't have to grapple with. But I can see why for other people, it might be but just even having a vocabulary for it, you can just say like, oh, I see why as a book person, you have this feeling and I don't. Instead of being like, you're wrong, you're heartless, or like you're rigid, you don't love adventure. It's like, oh, we just have we just see the world in a different way. So I'm hoping to have a lot of it. That was very clarifying for me to understand like, people are talking about moving to Portugal. Why? I can't imagine. I have no
Well,
desire to do something like that. Like, now I know why.
I so much look forward to Open Door and Book People and Tree People and all the other new vocabulary that you're going to give us. And hopefully you'll be back to GPS. But I
You
think with our
bet.
last 10 minutes, we should open it up to the questions that folks have.
Great deal.
Yes,
Turn it
good.
over to Gilda.
That's great. Excellent. Oh, such a fascinating conversation, ladies. So here are a couple of questions. We can't leave you without asking you this question, our happiness experts. Both of you, what do people get wrong about happiness?
Ooh,
Maybe
Lori,
we pick one, Gretchen. You can
or
go first.
you go
I'll go,
first
you go
because
first.
I've been talking too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I see, and maybe this is my Yale students, is money and happiness.
Mm,
It is true that money matters for happiness, but really only up to a point. All the data show is that it might not fully level off in terms of like, more money leading to happiness, but there's such an opportunity cost of focusing on money versus focusing on all the other things you could focus on. More time with friends, more time to be present, more time in nature, whatever it is. So yeah, my big one is money and happiness.
good. Thank
My big one is thinking that there's like a right way or a best way or a more scientifically proven way to do it. And that like if something works really well for somebody else, it'll work well for you. And skipping kind of
you.
the self-knowledge that we were talking about before. Because if you're a night person, don't try to go running in the morning. If you're a person who yeah, loves to travel, figure out how to get that. If you're a homebody, don't have a fantasy. Earlier, Laurie was talking about the sort of the fantasy self. Don't get pulled into these, or like push yourself to do rollerblading when you're like, why would I think this is the right thing for me? I think oftentimes people skip that step. They think there's some best answer and try to just jam that themselves into that mold.
Mhm. You both spent a lot of time talking about if we know ourselves, so many things will become clearer. Our values and what drives us and what does make us happy and how to limit our time. How do we get to know ourselves better in this crazy, fast-paced world?
Wait, I have a couple of suggestions. First
It's
of all, I have my four tendencies quiz. I have to say, I love this quiz. I think it really helps parents and children. I have kids take it all the time. It's super clarifying. You can take it for free on my site. Just go to gretchenrubin.com. It tells you whether you're an upholder, questioner, obliger, or rebel, and it explains so many parent-child conflicts. I have many parents who say that they will they'll mark up the book and take it to a child's teacher. And teachers get a gold star because they're they seem very willing to contemplate that. So if if you want to understand yourself and like how to fix manage your habits in yourself, or if you're having issues with your child, I think that's very clarifying. And there's another tool, Lori. I don't know if you know about Values Bridge. This is
Oh yeah.
I love Values Bridge. I'm so preoccupied with Values Bridge. This is a tool that tells you your values. Now, I don't know if she's had children take it. I know students in high school, in college and graduate school take it. I don't know if it's right for children. It's certainly clarifying for adults. And it will tell, there are 18 values and it tells you your values. And I just found this to be enormously clarifying with me. And now I can read a novel and be like, oh, I see that this person has these values. And it helps you know yourself, but it also gets you out of your head to understand other people, because it's like, why do they do what they do? Because they have a different value. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they're expressing a different value, something that may not matter to you. And so, okay. So anyway, so my own quiz for tendencies and values bridge. Okay, Laurie, what would you say?
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I also love the values in action character strengths. So it's very similar to values, but it's really
I find
looking at.
that kind of confusing though.
Oh,
Hmm.
really? I
Hmm.
love this. I
Hmm.
think it's, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's similar. It's like
It's
another quiz that you
22,
can.
right?
24, yes. So it's
24.
similar. Yeah. But it's basically, I mean, there are a lot of these kinds of tools out there, but really what they're trying to do is like you can even just like here's a big list of adjectives or here's a big list of strengths and like which ones resonate with you? And you start to realize that like oh, like I care about these particular values, I care about these particular strengths, and whenever I engage with them, I kind of like them and I kind of dig it. So I think these self-knowledge quizzes are often really helpful. But another thing I'll add gets back to something we were talking about before, which is just the time piece. I think it's really hard to know yourself when you're feeling frantic all the time. When there's just like a
So
billion
true.
things on your plate and there's a million things, you kind of
So
need
true.
this space to, and then you'll often see what matters and what you need and what's missing, right? If you can kind of give yourself some space. So I think this is another reason why time affluence matters so much too.
But here's a quick question that you can ask yourself that's very
Mm,
revealing,
please.
which is, whom do you envy?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because
What novels do you gravitate towards?
yeah,
Like who are the
yeah.
characters you love in novels and you're rooting for? Like those are often, engaging in values that you care about.
That's good. The next question, you spend a lot of time talking about relationships, and what do you want to say as we get close to closing this hour? Um, why are relationships so very important to our happiness?
Mm. Well, I'll start there. I mean, there's just so much data showing that what matters most for happiness is social relationships, right? From just studies of super happy people that you find that super happy people are investing their time and their energy into relationships, to this very famous Harvard study that's been kind of ongoing for decades that looks at what are the things that make people happy and healthy into their 80s and 90s. And you find that it's basically not your money or your accomplishments, it's really all your social relationships. And I, as a nerdy psychologist, love this work a lot because there's also lots of studies showing that we get social connection wrong. Nick Epley at the University of Chicago, one of your locals, has this lovely work on what he calls under sociality, this idea that we're constantly underestimating how good it would be to give someone a compliment, or how nice it would feel to reach out to text someone, or how nice it would feel if someone reached out to us, right? We know it's beneficial, but we don't get just how rewarding it is. And that means like we don't do it enough. And so I think the message from our cognitive bias work and all the happiness work is like social connection just matters, 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 matters. It matters more than our brains like to think, and it matters for more stuff than we think, like getting a heart attack or not, right? Like recovering from cancer or not. Social connection is just like the biggest booster of happiness. But like everything that matters, it takes time, and we're often not investing the time into that stuff. And I
Right.
think also for our kids, not allowing them to invest time in it, right? We as parents often care a lot about the extracurriculars and the homework and the whatever, but we don't think the, time on the video game with a friend or the like quick walk, to school with a, student, from your team or something matters. But those things matter a lot.
Yeah. No. And then, I mean, and this is ancient philosophers agree. Like, this is just one of the most profound truths is that humans are among the most social creatures and it's essential for our happiness. Yeah. Just anything that deepens or broadens relationships is a good way to use
Mm,
your time, energy, or money. I think that's a very helpful framework.
yes. Yeah.
With like, if you're like, okay, I don't have that much time, energy, or money, it's like, okay, well, is this going to deepen or broaden a relationship? Should I go to my college reunion? It's going to be a hassle. It's going to cost money. I'm going to have to like do a lot of juggling. Yeah, probably it would make you happier because it's going to go back to these relationships you've had a long time. Or like, oh, should I plan a 4th of July barbecue for all our old friends from our old neighborhood that we haven't seen in a while? Yeah, probably it would be worth the time and the effort because you're reinvesting in those relationships. It's like to me it's a very very helpful heuristic.
And even the little, I think the little ones here, this is some of Nick Epley's work that like, if you have this instinct of like, oh, I love that sweater, I should tell this stranger on the street, or, oh, I just thought of a friend, I thought of some funny joke that we had together. He's like, those moments, just do it. Like always, like, you think of like, oh, I should buy, like my sister-in-law something cute, right? And it was like, oh, anytime you think of that, just do it. Because our instinct is always like, oh, they won't care or whatever, but our instincts are totally wrong. So I love that. Whenever
Well,
you have
there's
the social instinct, just go for it.
well, no, there's also research showing that we tend to think that like we're more awkward or that like people will be like bemused or put off by our gestures of like reaching out. But then in fact, people are everybody gets it and
They
everybody
love it.
welcomes
They
that
always
much
love it.
more. And so like even it can feel very awkward, especially as an adult, like, oh, do you want to like go out for coffee or whatever? But that people are much more receptive to that than we think. Doing it, like people welcome it much more. And so and I think sometimes you're like, oh gosh, that came out all wrong, or I don't know why I said that. It's like other people just, that's the spotlight effect. They're not putting you in the spotlight as much as you think. And so really like putting yourself out there. But again, happiness doesn't always make you feel happy. These kinds of things can often feel arduous, annoying, difficult, you know, awkward, but they're
But
worth
they
it.
work. But they work.
But they work.
There is a question there about motivation, motivating your child, and it makes me come back to the relationship because we hear all the time that if you don't have a relationship with your child, they're not. Well, go ahead, finish that sentence.
Wait, can I just say, if you're worried
Yeah.
about motivating your child, please look at the four tendencies. I'm just gonna
Mhm.
like promote my own stuff shamelessly here. I don't believe in motivation. You can't expect to be motivated by motivation. Lori, I don't know how you feel about the
Nope,
motivation.
agreed.
I
Completely.
just
Yeah.
dismissed motivation altogether. The question is, how do you get yourself to do what you want, or how do you help somebody else get something done? And understanding the four tendencies and whether someone's an upholder, a questioner, a blighter, or a rebel is going to give you so much information about the right way to approach them so that you can give them what they need in order to help them achieve whatever it is that needs to get done. And when you're trying to like get somebody motivated, a lot of times it's just talk.
Mhm.
And I've heard from so many people where it's like, this is the, oh, thank you for that. By doing that, or maybe I'm clapping for myself there. Um, I just feel like this really does explain a lot about how people are different. And like, you could have one kid and you're like, it worked great with this kid. I don't under, but I'm at my wit's end with my other kid.
Yes.
Or, you know, I'm doing everything that's always worked before, like what's going on. And this really explains it. And so when people are talking that's kind of my clue that people are in the four tendencies area when they start talking about motivating people or themselves.
Beautiful. I can't thank you enough for this amazing hour. Two brilliant women. What a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Join us. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago about we're raising the 35-year-old. At next Tuesday's program, we're going to continue that conversation to think broadly, open that up. So join us for that and read these books. They're all wonderful.
Oh,
Can't say
thank
enough
you.
about it. Thank you, ladies. Have a great day.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everyone. We'll see
much.
you
Thank
soon.
you.